All right, I got to go live today and talk about something that really annoys me. I'm actually broadcasting this simultaneously on X, YouTube, and TikTok Live. So if my eyes jump around from camera to camera, bear with me. Today, Jaime Dimon was on Fox Business with Maria Bartiromo, and he was talking about the Clarity Act and how unfair he perceives the compromises that was reached by the Senate on the yield provisions of the Clarity Act that apply to stablecoins. And he's talking about how they're going to fight this. And one of the things that he said that's really gone viral on social is that he was talking about the other guy who's on the other side of this fight, the CEO of Coinbase, Brian Armstrong. And Jaime Dimon said that Brian Armstrong is full of shit. And okay, he's entitled to his opinion, of course. But you know what? Let's call it out for what it is, Jaime. If Brian Armstrong is full of shit, the banks are full of shit too. And let me just lay it out in plain terms. There has been a fight going on right now in Congress over the Clarity Act. And if you follow me on socials, you know that I put out the free guide, Make Your Wallet Your Bank. I'm a big advocate for stablecoins and how I believe stablecoins empower consumers to break away from these banks and what they do to consumers, the fees that they charge to consumers, the toll booth economy, as I describe it. And I've been a big advocate that consumers should have choices. I've also been a very vocal critic that I think the banks do not want consumers to have choices when it comes to where they can park their money, how they can send their money, because the banks have enjoyed a monopoly on how consumers hold and move their money. In that toll booth economy, the banks get consumers coming and going. Wire fees, overdraft fees, insufficient fund fees, you don't have enough in your account fees, account management fees. And then they turn around and they hold your money, and you think it's your money and you can get it out anytime. But the harsh reality is that the banks have given you an IOU on your money. You see, under their fractional reserve model, the banks don't actually hold your deposits. They lend them out to other people. They put your money on the street multiple times over and make interest, car loan interest, credit line interest. They pay you on average less than 1% to park your money in a bank. They pull fees out of every corner. Just look at your bank statement and you can see. Incidentally, if you want to download the free guide, go to my profile. Give me a follow, first of all. Go to my profile and download your free copy of Make Your Wallet Your Bank. Learn how you can break away with stable coins, save money, and use that money to put in your bottom line, not the bank's. But back to this whole Jaime Dimon Clarity Act thing. The banks don't want competition when it comes to this because, yeah, they take your money, they park it in an account, they pay you next to nothing in interest. They then lend out your money multiple times and make interest over and over on your money. If you want your money back, they don't actually have it on hand, which is why the banks have to have FDIC insurance. You see, Jaime Dimon talks about how the Clarity Act is not making Clarity Act provisions are not good because stablecoins don't carry FDIC, or I should say they don't carry, we know they don't carry FDIC insurance because guess what? They don't have to carry FDIC insurance because every stablecoin that's created under the Genius Act must be by law backed one-to-one by a treasury asset. Unlike the money that banks hold, which they hold on a fractional reserve basis, they don't have to actually cover that money because in the event that everybody wants to get their money out of the bank at once, in the event of a bank run, which has happened in history, the banks have to turn to the Fed under FDIC insurance to backstop them and bail them out because, again, they don't actually have your money on hand. Now, Jaime was complaining that there's not enough anti-money laundering and know your customer provisions in the Clarity Act, which is completely out of line because he should know better than anybody that what really controls the legal framework, and look, I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for nearly 30 years, criminal defense lawyer. I've seen it all. And I know how the banks operate, okay? That's why I wrote this book, because the banks have been getting away with something that is really interesting when you boil it down. I've been in the money laundering cases, I've been in the wire fraud cases, I've seen the victims of these crimes lose everything. And while the banks sit there and say that it is crypto that's the biggest vehicle for money laundering, and we need to have more AML, anti-money laundering, and more know your customer controls over crypto and stable coins, what they don't tell you is the reality is that the banks and cash is still the predominant vehicle for money laundering. No contest. But what's interesting about all this is, in all the years that I've been in the courtrooms and I've seen the victims come forward with their victim impact statements, and I've represented the people that have been charged with the fraud and the money laundering and the unlicensed money transmitter crimes, they go to prison, they're ordered to pay restitution. Sometimes the victims get their money, sometimes they don't. But you know who gets to keep their fees at the end of the day? The banks. The banks that are used as the facilitator by these criminals of money laundering, who have to also pay wire fees, just like you got to pay wire fees to send and receive money through your bank, the fraudsters and the criminals got to pay the same wire fees. 30, 40, I even had a bank quote me $70 in wire fees. These banks get to keep all those fees. All they got to do is they got to comply with their suspicious activity reports, they got to comply with their anti-money laundering protocols, and they got to cooperate with the feds, close the accounts, give up the bank records, so on and so forth. But they get to keep the fees on all the money that was sent by these fraudsters. Isn't that crazy? Now, as if they don't get to keep enough fees, they want to control how consumers can send and move their money because they want to maintain a monopoly. Now, going back to this whole thing with Jaime Dimon about how there's not enough anti-money laundering and KYC baked in to the Clarity Act when it comes to stablecoins, wrong, Jamie. You know better. Go back, talk to your lawyers maybe, talk to your in-house people, because they'll quickly educate you that it's not the Clarity Act that controls the anti-money laundering and KYC requirements for stablecoins. It's this thing that passed a year ago called the Genius Act. The Genius Act is what has created these stablecoins under fully regulated treasury-backed regime. That's the first time this has ever happened in the history of stablecoins, and it's fully transformative. But in the Clarity Act, there are audit requirements, custody requirements, segregation requirements for the funds. AML and KYC is also baked into the Clarity Act. I should say the Genius Act. So you got that wrong today, Jamie. That's fine. I'll give you a pass. I get how the regulations work. I know how the law works. You're wrong. The second thing is you're upset because rewards are still possible for consumers on stablecoins under the compromise that was reached in the Clarity Act. You see, if you don't know the backstory here, the banks have been fighting for months through their lobbying groups, through their trade associations. They've been flooding the zone in Congress, begging Congress to end all rewards on stablecoins, because the Genius Act specifically prohibits the issuer of the stablecoin. USDC is issued by Circle. Circle is specifically prohibited under the Genius Act from paying consumers interest or yield directly. So what has been going on? Consumers have been getting yield on stablecoins in the form of rewards on a platform like Coinbase. Brian Armstrong, the guy that Jaime Dimon said is full of shit, he's been able to pay rewards to consumers on stablecoins if they're custodied on Coinbase. The banks have been fighting tooth and nail on this because they do not want consumers to have a way to earn rewards or interest, whatever you want to call it, yield on stablecoins that are just being passively held in accounts. They actually, according to my interpretation of the way they've been arguing this thing, they want to end any and all rewards for consumers. But Congress stopped them. Congress said, no, here's the compromise. And this is after months of back channel communications between Coinbase, Congress people, the banks. The compromise that was reached was the banks are going to win in one way and one way alone. No passive yield to consumers on stablecoins. You can have rewards on stablecoins if they're tied to activity. That was the compromise that was reached. It leaves a lane open for consumers to be able to earn rewards on stablecoins, but the banks aren't happy about that, okay? And Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's been fighting on behalf of the banks, proposed a bunch of amendments to the Clarity Act trying to kill this bill from going forward to protect the banks, because not only do they want to eliminate passive rewards on stablecoins, they want to eliminate all rewards on stablecoins. They claim it's because they're going to have this flight of deposits, that all the depositors are going to take their money out of the banks and put it all in Coinbase and stablecoins, and then they won't have any money to lend out, and it's going to kill the community banks. The only problem is the White House did a study on this and called them out and said that's bullshit. The Senate has also done their own independent research in this and said that you are way overblowing this thing. In order for that to happen, you'd have to have such a combination of the worst case scenarios possible for the banks to get really affected by this that you're ridiculous in trying to make this argument. So it came down to the wire. The banks continued to get pissed, and they went publicly and they said to the senators who were advocating for the passage of the Clarity Act that they still don't like this compromise with respect to this passive yield issue that was baked into the Clarity Act. And finally, to their credit, the Republicans in the Senate told the banks enough. They publicly tweeted back to the banking lobby groups who put out the most ridiculous post on Mother's Day about how unfair it is that stablecoins are going to get rewards. And these senators said enough. We're going to have to agree to disagree on this, and you're going to have to move on. But then Jaime Dimon gets on Fox and Friends Today with Maria Bartiromo and says, no. We're not done yet. Even though it's cleared the markup in the Senate Banking Committee and it's scheduled to get reconciled and go to a vote before the floor of the Senate, we're not done fighting. We're going to fight this thing. We'll be okay if we don't win. Of course you're going to be okay, Jamie. You make tons of money off of consumers, and you'll always continue to make tons of money off of consumers. Now, look, I am not, to be clear, anti-bank. I'm happy to put out content that tries to educate banks, and I've tried to talk to banks about how they could actually win by integrating stablecoins because they would be helping the consumer. If you presented the consumer with two options, let me give you the two options. You can use our bank to send a wire. We'll charge you $35, $40, $50 to send the wire. Or you could use a stablecoin, which runs on a blockchain. So our banking hours are the limitation on sending a wire. You want to send a wire on a Friday afternoon at 4:30 when the bank's about to close? Too bad. You're not going to get that money anywhere until that following Monday because we work on banking hours. So we're going to send your money for $35, $40 a pop on a wire. We're going to make you wait sometimes a day to 3 days for the money to get there. And we're going to make you live by our banking hours. So that's option number one. If a community bank were to go to a business or a consumer and say, hey, I got a better option for you, you could move your money instantly, meaning at the speed of the internet with stablecoins, for pennies without the need to go through the banks. Isn't that a good thing for you, consumer? It helps your bottom line. But you see, the banks I've talked to about this, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. They want to continue to do things their way because they make money doing it. And the problem is they're running up against one big issue. Stablecoins are happening because whether the Clarity Act passes or not, the Genius Act passed, and stablecoins are coming for you, banks. So you're either going to have to learn to play nice with stablecoins, you're going to have to cut your fees, you're going to have to drive your fees to move money down to near zero so you can stay competitive, or you're going to lose. Seems to me the banks want to double down and lose. Now again, I wrote the book, Make Your Wallet Your Bank. I talk constantly about there's a better way for consumers with stablecoins. There's a better way for businesses too. Because again, if the community bank were to go to a business customer in their community and say, hey, I know that every time someone swipes a credit card at the point of sale at your business, you got to pay 3.5% to the merchant fees for the credit card transaction. You got to wait while your money sits in float in a bank, earning us interest. And then 3 days later, we'll send you your money, your hard earned money. Or you could use this magical thing called a digital dollar, a stable coin that's backed 1-to-1 by treasury assets that basically works the same as a dollar. And you could accept that at the point of sale from a customer, and it would leave their wallet, their digital wallet, make your wallet your bank. Remember what I talk about. And it would go directly to the business without the 3.5% merchant fee, without the waiting time on the float while it just sits in the interwebs waiting to get to your account. You could get your money instantly. Which would you choose if you were a customer at a local bank? But the banks don't want to have this conversation with their customers. The banks want to continue to make you pay through the nose to hold your money, to send your money, to receive your money. Hell, they even charge wire fees to receive wire fees. Think about that. If somebody wants to wire me money, they got to pay to send it to me, and I got to pay for the courtesy of receiving it. This is all coming to an end with stablecoins. So when Jaime Dimon gets up there and says that Brian Armstrong is full of shit, let's read between the lines what I interpret that to mean. What I interpret that to mean is he understands that Brian Armstrong runs a business and that he's made a lot of money with this arrangement that he has with Circle, where USDC custodied on Coinbase pays out rewards, and Circle pays Coinbase handsomely for that arrangement. And it's very obvious that Brian Armstrong would like to keep that arrangement going. So I get what he's trying to say, that, quote, Brian Armstrong's full of shit because, he's just trying to look out for his own bottom line. Okay, fine. But in the meantime, you all are also full of shit on the bank side because you don't want to give the consumer any options. You don't want to give the consumer the chance to make any rewards on their stable coins, no interest, no nothing, because you want to close the moat around what you have, which is a monopoly. So you're also full of shit on the bank side. So it's kind of disingenuous to say that Brian Armstrong is full of shit, but the banks somehow are acting in the best interest of the consumer. Now look, you could recover from this, banks. Hey, my DMs are open. I'd be happy to come in and explain to you how you can make this a positive for you. I put out tons of content on my Substack, Stablecoin Strategies on Substack. That's my newsletter that I put out all the time, where I talk about the latest developments. So between Stablecoin Strategies, my Substack newsletter, between all the articles that I put out on X, between all the podcasting I do with the Stablecoin Solutions Show, which is the first and only show on X dedicated to talking all things stablecoins, I put together a roundtable of the key players that had really meaningful input on what was going on with the Genius Act before it went live. I've been talking to banks. I've spoken at banking conferences, trying to understand why banks are so resistant to what is honestly inevitable. Stable coins are about to flatten your industry. And you can either adapt or you can get crushed because your fees are no longer sustainable. And I'm going to continue to be vocal about this. So if you banks out there would like to follow me, follow my content, I'm going to explain to you how this whole thing is going to work with the Genius Act, all the pitfalls, all the regulatory requirements that are coming online soon that you're going to have to comply with. And we could talk about how we could change your approach and you could actually do a service to the consumer. Boy, this is mind-blowing. You could actually tell the consumer, hey, There's this new thing out there and you can save money using it. It's going to make us less money, but you know what? Times are tough and you're getting bled left and right. Maybe we could help you for a change. So I'm going to wrap this one up because I think I've said my piece. But the bottom line is for Jaime Dimon to say that Brian Armstrong is full of shit, I get to a degree what he's trying to say, but he also needs to close the loop on that. And he needs to acknowledge that, you know what, the banks are full of shit too. They're all in it for their bottom line. I'm here with a free guide. Make your wallet your bank. Trying to educate you as consumers and businesses that there's a better way. I am also here to provide content and educational materials to the industry people who are going to have to adapt to this stuff, because here's the bottom line before I close this thing out. Right now, the Genius Act is law, but the regulations are still being written. And in the next probably 6 months, this is all going to go online and be live. So anyone that's exploring stablecoins right now from the industry side, you want to launch a branded stablecoin, you want to be a custodian of stablecoins, you want to be an issuer of stablecoins, you want to be a fintech that plays with stablecoins, all of you on the industry side, right now you're in a little bit of a gray area where you're all acting in compliance with the Genius Act as you read the law. But you're waiting for the regulations to come out. And when those regulations come out and go live, that's when the switch turns from complying with regulations to an enforcement climate. And the Genius Act has pretty strict regulatory conditions with respect to if you violate any of the conditions of the Genius Act. If you fail to do proper audits, if you fail to disclose, if you fail to comply with any aspect of the Genius Act, including the anti-money laundering and KYC stuff, you could be subject to severe fines and penalties, and even in the worst case scenario, criminal sanctions. So again, the Stablecoin Strategy Substack, I put out a lot of great content to help you understand that this pivotal transition point, what you need to know so that you can avoid those pitfalls from the industry side. From the consumer side, free of charge, I put out a book. I put out all this content trying to help consumers and businesses learn how to adapt and implement stablecoins. Because you know what happened yesterday? I talked about it. Cash App announced a couple of days ago that they are now offering stablecoins on Cash App. 60 million users on Cash App are about to get exposure to stablecoins. This stuff isn't going away, Jamie, and you can fight it all you want, but you're going to lose. The reason you're going to lose is because you're going to stick to what you've been doing for decades, which is that toll booth economy. And you can pretend that you're playing with stablecoins like you talked about in the interview, but you're not. You're playing with depository tokens. You're not really giving the consumer stablecoins at the end of the day. You're not really giving them low-cost options to move their money fast. You created a JPM token, which is a depository token. That's your foray into blockchain technology and stablecoins. The thing that I'd love to see you do is I'd love to see you give consumers actual access to stablecoins, make their wallet their bank, let them move their money on their terms, and eliminate all those fees. Because one way or the other, stablecoins aren't going away. Stablecoins are here to stay. But you know what's going to disappear? Your fees. Because you're not going to be able to compete. So, Brian Armstrong, according to Jaime Dimon, is full of shit. The banks are full of shit too. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Have a great weekend. Happy Friday. Remember to follow me. Remember to go to my profile, download the free guide. Doesn't cost you nothing but an email address. Learn how to implement this stuff, because I promise you, if you at least explore it and experiment with it, and I'll be happy to help you along the way to give you this free content, you're going to discover there's a better way. And every dime that you save and take out of the bank's pocket and put back in your pocket is another dime that you could deploy for yourself. So my mantra, spend in stables, stack in sats. Read the book and I'll explain all that to you in the book. And make your wallet your bank. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. I appreciate you hanging out with me today.